On today's show, we have the post-game reaction to another very good Milwaukee Bucks win. As we saw a couple of duos go at it down the stretch. It's the Bucks duo of Giannis and Dame Lillard outlasting Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic for the fourth straight win for your Milwaukee Bucks. We get into the post-game analysis after this on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia. He's Frank Madden, longtime voice of the podcast that we've all come to rely on for our post-game analysis here. We thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and viewable on YouTube as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Today's episode also brought to you by PrizePicks. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Frank, so obviously a nice win for the Bucks, who I mentioned have won 4 in a row now. We'll get to some of the numbers that we've seen in what's developing as a trend for this team ever since that Knicks game. But we have to start with Giannis and 40 points. This was the 17th time he's had a stat line of 40 or more, 10 or more rebounds, and 5 or more assists in the last 5 years. That's the most in the NBA. And I know less than a week ago, he had a 54-point game. But this far and away to me, not even close. This was the best we have seen him, not only this year, but in quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think the opponent, right? I mean, the Mavs are not a good defensive team, but Grant Williams, our old friend, we've seen way too much of Grant Williams in a Boston Celtics jersey, our first chance to see him in a Mavs jersey. And, I think he's always he's on that short list of guys that I think, have done the best jobs of just sort of staying strong on Giannis. We talk about Onyeka Okongwu from the Hawks, or some of the kind of favorite names of guys that really play Giannis tough. And I thought, he mostly did pretty well against Giannis tonight. But it was really interesting the kind of the way this game went, because, you score 40 points, you think like, oh man, you probably must have been cooking sort of throughout. But, with Giannis, it was pretty, fast start, 12 points in the first quarter. They were able to get some stuff going in transition. I thought, Derek Lively, the rookie center for the Mavs, who's been a real nice kind of energy guy for them. I think he just looked like fresh meat out there for Giannis. And, he was just able to kind of do whatever he wanted. It seemed like against Lively, getting to the basket in that first quarter. But third quarter in particular, things really dried up. And it seemed like Giannis, was having to settle for some jump shots. Dallas kind of just decided like, what, like, we're going to pack the paint a little bit, and we're going to see if we can bait him into shooting jump shots, anything but, getting in the rim for layups. And, he started missing. And I think, at one point he was 10 out of 17. And in my head math, it was probably like, I don't know if he missed anything at the rim, but he didn't make anything outside of the restricted area either. And so it just kind of felt like, oh man, this is one of those frustrating Giannis, the shot isn't there games. And unfortunately, he has been much better in that sort of in-between range so far this year. Came into this game, I think, around 47% in the non-rim paint area. So, kind of floater range, hook shots, those kind of short jumpers that, last year he was at 28%, this year 47%. So dramatic improvement. And it felt like, man, the first half of the third quarter was just the Bucks in mud. It felt like you were really missing Chris Middleton being that sort of like connective tissues, kind of secondary pick and roll option, sometimes primary pick and roll option, especially with Giannis. But thankfully they kind of like got out of the mud enough sort of right at the end of the third quarter, and were able to stay within touching distance. And, Cam Payne made shots. Pat Connaughton was huge tonight. The bench, I thought, did generally a great job. But, when they needed buckets in that fourth quarter, Giannis goes 6 for 6, 15 points. He has the game sealing jumper from the left side, which, okay, maybe not the shot I would have drawn up there, but regular season, happy he hit it. He hit a 3 in the fourth quarter. Okay. Happy it went in. And Damian Lillard made plays down the stretch. But, I thought Connaughton, a couple of big time corner threes, including one of those catch high, keep high threes that we've seen over the past couple of years. And so, I think it's one of those games where, against Charlotte last night, yeah, you want to beat the crap out of the Charlotte Hornets, right? Even if it's on the road, whatever. You wanted to really kind of blow that team out to show that, like, okay, we are starting to find our rhythm. You did that against the Raptors for about 40, 4 minutes or so of that game. Comprehensive win on Friday night. But against the Dallas Mavericks on the second night of a back-to-back, I think you're taking any win you can get. That this Mavericks team, offensively, they do whatever they want. So you're really just trying to survive. And yeah, like if you need to outscore them. I'm not going to, worry too much about the defensive rating tonight not being great, because this is a team that, again, has started really well. They were 9-3 coming into this game. And obviously with Luka and Kyrie, they're just a handful offensively. But I don't know about you, Justin. I did not picture Malik Beasley and Dame Lillard D'ing up enough against those two in the two-man game to fuel a Bucks comeback campaign, also contributing. But sure enough, that group did just enough. Maybe a little Jedi mind trick defense. Grant Williams finally missed some jump shots, and next thing you know, Bucks walk away with I wouldn't say a comfortable win, but a 7-point win is again a great win, probably arguably the best win of the season. Even with the Philly win on opening night, I felt like this game in some ways was more encouraging.
Yeah, I would say this, all things considered, it's probably the best win of the season. I know the Philly one is right up there as well, but that was a weird game with everything that was kind of hanging over Philadelphia with the James Harden situation. Joel Embiid did not look great. That it prompted you to question, is he in shape? What's going on here? So there was a lot with that Philly game. And this one, night two of a back-to-back, you mentioned all the guys the Bucks were without, not just Chris, but even Marjan, to have another guy to throw out there on the perimeter at that duo, because Kyrie Irving, I think people will kind of look up at the stat sheets and say he had how many points? Like, didn't he have only a handful of points? He had 6 at halftime and just erupted in the second half. But we were talking before the game, and I don't think this is speaking out of school, with Josh Oppenheimer, who handled the scout for this, and kind of tiptoed around. Look, our strategy is, we know Luka and Kyrie are good, and he didn't say this, but I'll put words in his mouth, that we don't have Drew and great individual defenders, so we assume they're gonna get theirs. Our whole game plan is mostly going to be centered around, it can't be Grant Williams and Tim Hardaway Jr. Like, that duo is going to score a lot. They can't have a third guy that scores. And when the Mavs went on their charges, it was Tim Hardaway started to heat up. Grant Williams was hitting some threes. Their defense did enough down the stretch where they also just kind of said it. And Adrian Griffin talked about this after the game. I think Eric asked him about some of the defensive adjustments, and that you're not going to stop everything. When you got Luka and Kyrie on the floor, you got to give something up. And to us, that was fine. We'll let Kyrie Irving just drive to the basket. We're not going to give up threes.
Yeah, and they didn't foul in the way that we've often seen them fouling early this season. Apparently, their Mavs fans were very mad about the fourth quarter in the officiating. I saw a tweet about it, and I read all these tweets, looking for what were they actually mad about? What were the calls that they were mad about? And apparently, one of was the Hardaway corner three where Connaughton challenged it, but it was basically a high five call, which again, for people who haven't heard that term, I feel like a lot of fans don't realize this. You can't hit someone on the wrist, but if you slap kind of the tips of your fingers together on the follow through, that's called a high five. That's actually not illegal. That's not supposed to be a foul. And that when I literally watched the end of the Mavs broadcast, because I figured okay, let me see if what's the Mavs broadcast talking about? And they showed a replay of it, and yeah, I mean, he kind of touches it. He totally cleared him from the side. He definitely didn't get in his landing space. And Hardaway kind of went down awkward. He kind of sat down, try to make it seem like there was something there, because I think he was, I don't know, anticipating lower contact or whatever. But yeah, they really stayed down on Luka, and really Luka, right? Luka's kind of the guy that is just a very, let's say, savvy at drawing fouls. And he seemed mad. I think it was on the same play. It was on that same play where they got an offensive rebound, and he then drove. And I mean, I watched the replay a couple times, like where he missed that like kind of short banker from the right side, Damian Lillard guarding him. I mean, Dame's like, in his airspace right there. But I mean, it's like we watch Giannis, right? And like the amount of contact that people give Giannis, all the time without fouls is like, 5 times what that was. It's just like, I don't know. It's like, yeah, like Luka, like people are going to like touch you around the basket, like it didn't even get up into his arms or anything. So I don't know, but clearly there was some frustration from the Maverick side, but I mean, like you mentioned the game plan a little bit, like, as you said, I mean, the other guys got a lot of good looks, and I was a little surprised. Tim Hardaway, 17 points on 14 shots, felt like he had that run late in the third where it felt like the Bucks were kind of letting go of the rope. Given in the third quarter, how the offense looked, right? The offense, especially in the first half of that third quarter, just looked very stagnant. A lot of just jump shots that just weren't going in, and lo and behold, right, we saw them hit 20 plus threes the last 2 games. So it's like, oh, they don't just make all the threes anymore. What's going on? But fortunately, they were able to kind of stick around and manufacture points, and then they just made plays down the stretch, and it just seemed like the Mavs settled at times. And Kyrie and Luka both had some really quick threes, like right at like literally dribble up like right into threes. On one of those, and Kyrie just like bundles over Dame to when they were in the penalty to give away 2 free throws that way. Like it was just like some really stupid stuff, I felt like, as well. And it just seemed like all the frustration that Bucks fans were probably feeling in the third quarter with some of the like inability to hit shots. Probably the Mavs are feeling some of the same things, just kind of pissing away the lead because again, they just were just missing a lot of shots, and a lot of them were pretty good looks. But yeah, I mean, I thought Dame and Beasley, like they battled valiantly against those 2 guys. Those 2 guys still got made some shots against them, but I think it also wasn't like they were so overmatched that they were just getting 3-point plays every time, or they were just putting the defense into rotation. And obviously the Mavs couldn't hit threes. So sometimes better to be lucky than good defensively, especially against an offense like this. But again, at the end of the day, like especially the circumstances, missing most of your small forwards, and on the second night of a back-to-back, having flown in late last night, I guess, from Charlotte, I mean, you'll take that win every day. And I don't know. I mean, Justin, we were talking right before the broadcast about sort of the vibes in the building around the team. I mean, it just feels like the last three games in particular, starting with that Toronto game and Malik Beasley's shimmying and shaking and dancing. It just feels like a little bit of a weight has come off their shoulders. And yeah, I mean, look, it's early, and if they get their doors blown off in Boston on Wednesday, then everyone's going to be talking about how they're still not close to the Celtics, blah blah blah. But it's just, I think it was just important for them to start, like, again, just kind of building some positive momentum, and guys just kind of starting to, like, I don't know, Justin, smile a little bit. Some smiles were nice the last couple games.
Look, all of the last couple of games, for the most part, with the exception of those like 4 minutes you referenced in Toronto, it felt very nice because it has been a weight lifted off of this team where, it's very early in the season. It's 13 games, but now it's been like, okay, finally, this is what we expected to see for this group. And some of the numbers back that up. It's a very small sample. We'll get to that in just a second, but I do want to get to some of the luck that you mentioned as well, that you need that, because I think there was a lot more of it that we saw in the fourth quarter for this Bucks team that really aided their defense. But again, on night 2 of a back-to-back, you take anything that you can get here for this group. Let's also tell you about PrizePicks, and with basketball season here, PrizePicks is the place to go. It's the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. So instead of battling thousands of players, like pros and sharks, you just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch your winnings roll in. Basketball season is here. You can now pick combo projections across football and basketball in the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections. that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. So, for example, if you wanted Brooke Lopez blocks and Jordan Love touchdown passes, and you had 5.5 on that, you'd be leaning pretty heavily on Brooke Lopez blocks, but you may be lucky with that. PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured for football and basketball games. If you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second half, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. So to play PrizePicks, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the promo code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use that promo code LockedOnNBA and you'll have a first deposit match up to $100. So part of that luck too that it felt like we started to see was, we mentioned it seemed apparent too that the strategy was as long as Grant Williams doesn't score 20 or Tim Hardaway Jr., we're fine with Luka and Kyrie going off because they're tremendous offensive players and they're going to do that. And we saw a lot more adjustments down the stretch from Adrian Griffin, or a couple of big ones, I should say, where we saw a couple of brief moments in the first half. They were blitzing Luka a little bit more when he started to get going. And then in the third quarter, he scored 10 of the Mavs' first 13 points when they went on a 13-0 run. And that's, you referenced losing the rope and thinking, here we go. And Griff made a couple of those, all right, let's get the ball out of his hands. But he did it a lot more in the fourth quarter. And there were some opportunities for Grant Williams and Tim Hardaway, and especially Grant Williams, where we saw the Bucks just say, despite saying, we don't want a third guy to go off, you just needed the ball out of Luka Doncic's hands. And I think at times you saw Grant Williams kind of tentative and passing up some looks, and a couple of Mavs players just passing up open looks. There's one possession where Grant Williams had a clear path to get to at least the restricted area and just kind of didn't know what to do. He gave it up and ended up in Dwight Powell's hands under the rim, and he's trapped there with Brooke Lopez, and Giannis comes over to help. That some of those things started to pile up as well that really aided the Bucks. But again, that's part of just saying, look, well, that's why Luka and Kyrie are so good, and that's why this guy we don't trust so much offensively.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I've seen Grant Williams torment the Bucks, and I was thrilled when he left Boston.
And largely only the Bucks.
Well, that's the thing. For all the damage he's done to the Bucks, I swear to God, I still don't think I've ever seen Grant Williams, hurt a team when he puts the ball on the floor. Like when Grant Williams is dribbling at the basket, I just feel like, great, love it. Good things are about to happen. And I also, as you were leading up to, I was like, Justin's going to mention that play where he just pretty much had a lane. He could have, and if he was a normal basketball player, he would have just dribbled to the basket and tried to get a layup. But yeah, I mean, and I think that's the thing about this year's team that we're not really used to, is that they can just sort of outscore you down the stretch, right? Even if the game is not fast, even if the game gets slowed down and becomes a bit more of a grind, and it's just, superstars going at superstars type stuff. Well, now we got a pretty good superstar to pair with Giannis to kind of be in that situation. And not a monster game from Dame, 7 of 18, 4 of 11 from 3. Again, kind of offensively from a perspective, it didn't feel like he got into a good rhythm early. But I think, again, you just look at the box score at the end of the day, and he still puts up 27 points on those 18 shots. And I talked about the other day after the Raptors game, I thought the Raptors games was where his passing was unlocked for really the first time all year. And I don't think this game was quite as good of a passing game as that Raptors game, which I thought was just a total clinic in terms of playmaking from him. But, 12 assists, I thought he really controlled the game in a way that was really impressive. Only 1 turnover. Overall, Bucks only had 6 turnovers in this game, which is pretty crazy. I mean, we've seen Giannis get 6 turnovers by himself a few times this year. So he only had 3 tonight, and the rest of the team pretty much just, took care of the ball really, really well. And Dame 9 out of 10 from the foul line again. So just getting to the free throw line and using that ability to draw fouls to kind of balance things out, compared to, the Mavericks, just 7 out of 10 total, which I think is partly why, their fan base is feeling so victimized or whatever. Because, of course, if the free throws aren't even, then obviously something must have been amiss. But, interestingly, Giannis only 3 out of 5. And, the last 2 of those, the only 2 that he took in the fourth quarter were after a foul 94 feet from the basket after Luka missed 2 free throws. So Luka going 1 for 4, I think speaks really well to how the Bucks defended him. And, and I mean, end of the day, he scores 35 on 26 shots. So again, like, it's hard to say, it's not like you locked him down or anything like that, but I thought they just were pretty disciplined, and they didn't, necessarily get into spots where they were having to, show too much help, or at least not in a way that just completely, put them out of sorts. But again, he had 9 assists, 3 turnovers, but he was a minus 17 in this game. So it really certainly was not the Luka minutes where they really excelled. And I thought, especially in the second half, almost like they seemed better when Kyrie was just out there by himself, because Kyrie just wasn't missing, which is, a useful skill to just not miss shots. So, but it was an interesting thing. And I thought, while we're talking about Luka and defending Luka, when we found out Chris wasn't going to play on the second night of the back-to-back, I thought, well, it's kind of got to be Andre Jackson Jr., right? That comes into the starting 5. And if he's in the starting 5, I'm putting him on Luka. And worst case scenario, he gets 3 fouls in 5 minutes, and, he got to send him to the bench, and it's just a learning experience. But I thought, he coped about as well as he could. Luka looked like he could barely. I think Luka got dinged up on the first play or something like that.
First play of the game, he was grabbing his hip and just started limping for a couple of trips down the floor.
And it is remarkable how good Luka Doncic is when he can barely seem to walk/run. I mean, it's incredible how he gets to his spots moving in slow motion. But he's just able to carve out space and use the pick and roll, put you on his backside. Andre Jackson was trying to get around him and be in decent spots. And, Andre played 12 minutes tonight, only took 1 shot, a couple of assists, was a minus 11, but, only 1 foul. So again, you're not going to look at the box score and say that there was, kind of great shakes there or anything like that. But I thought, once again, he kind of delivered a shot of adrenaline. And it's kind of weird. I almost couldn't remember the first. I was like, didn't he have that one sequence in the first half where he dished it out to AJ Green and then he threw that alley oop to Malik Beasley? Part of me was like, was that a different game? Did that happen last night and not tonight? But I'm pretty sure that happened tonight, right, Justin?
No, that was tonight, where he did the midair spin and dished to AJ Green in the corner, and then that half court lob for the alley oop to Beasley.
Yeah, and I thought, he got. That's just what he does. At this point, is he going to give you 30 minutes of consistent basketball? No, right? But last night we saw him hit 2 threes. Right? We have to mention that, including that herky jerky step back in the last 15 seconds or whatever it was of the game that got the entire bench off their feet. So it's been a feel good week for Andre Jackson, and this is what rookies have to do. They have to take advantage of opportunities when guys are hurt, and I think he's been doing that. And even if it's just energy and vibes and whatever, that's actually really useful in a 5th guy, given the amount of weapons the Bucks have. And I thought, Andre and also AJ Green, who, again, is part of the kind of next man up situation. AJ scores 8 points on 5 shots. There was discussion on the broadcast about his nickname. I maintain the best nickname for him is still Gerber Baby, but shockingly, that doesn't seem to be our friend Lisa Byington is not aware, either aware of Gerber Baby or does not really going to be sell Gerber Baby. I think she was talking about automatic AJ being a better nickname. Okay, fine. Maybe that's a better on a Bucks broadcast, but he will always be Gerber Baby to me. And he got rid of the headband that he had in training camp. So we can't call him, Cobra Kai or whatever, or Johnny Lawrence.
Johnny Lawrence. Yeah.
Otherwise, that would have been also another good one. But 8 points from him, and he had a big 3 in the fourth quarter. I think early in the fourth, he got out there with Giannis and paid off a wing 3, and again, when the offense is sluggish and shots aren't going down, again, he's one of those guys that when I see him out there, I think, all right, if shots going up, it's going in, right? And that's a pretty good place to be as a shooter when, you just expect the shot to go in.
And and not only that too, I think Griff did a good job of the rotations and when he used AJ Green too. That it seemed like it was basically exclusively when we saw Seth Curry on the floor, and that's when it was all right. Fine, we'll put you out there. That you're both going to do the same thing. You're not going to defend all that well, but you're going to be able to knock down the open three when that comes to you. I do want to get to some of the stuff we've seen numbers wise for this team the last couple games. I know Nate Duncan just pointed out an even smaller sample size of what we've seen from the offense. So we'll get to that and some final thoughts too on Andre Jackson after we talk to you about FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use, and you have a number of betting options like spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So just head to FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. Again, that website, FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. And the other thing too with Andre Jackson is kind of the same thing that you said when we had our first break on the radio broadcast. I think Luka had just checked out and had 10 or 11 points immediately. And Dave, Kane, and I both kind of said to each other, I'm not going to say he did good because here's where Luka's at, but I don't think Andre Jackson was bad defensively. Like Luka's going to score on guys. He's second in the league in scoring, and the spots that he got to, those are his spots. But I thought Andre did a good job staying with him and staying in front of him, and some of those were just, well, what are you going to do?
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, part of it is just like if you can not need too much help, then that's probably about as good as you can expect. And you just hope that he doesn't hit all those really difficult jump shots that he's capable of hitting. And I thought that was what Malik Beasley and Dame did well in the fourth quarter. Like, I think Kyrie got a couple creases and got to the basket for finishes, but I don't think Luka got anything like really easy. Like he kind of worked Malik down kind of in the paint and hit a short shot. And then there was the play that Dame contest that he missed that, he was apoplectic about not getting a foul call on, wow, cry me a river. But yeah, I mean, again, it's just like, like Adrian Griffin's talked about it. Like we've seen it when the Bucks defense has been bad. It's just because the point of attack, like guys just get gashed and, like you're just like straight line drives right to the basket. And all of a sudden, like everybody's put into rotation and either guys are getting layups or the ball's being dished around, swung around for open threes. So yeah, if you can just make it a little bit harder, right? And I think that's something that Marjon and Andre Jackson, that why they've been really useful parts of rotation so far is because they can just move their feet and just give you like, okay, the first guy gets walled off and then you got to go do something else, right? And so just making the other team actually need to work a little bit to get good shots, especially against a team like the Mavericks with the amount of shooting and shot making they have. That's kind of all you're doing, right? And at the end of the day, like 3-point shooting tonight was pretty even. So I think that was to me was kind of the big test. It's like, okay, great, you won a couple of games because you hit every freaking shot you took from three the last two games. So now you need to start winning games when, like win impressively when you don't have just a massive night from the 3-point line, right? Because we know that can kind of, mask other deficiencies. And tonight, they did that, right? We saw them lose some games. The Hawks game, the first Toronto game, those games ended up being actually pretty even from the 3-point line, even though it didn't feel like it, especially early in those games. But they ended up losing by a ton because they didn't do other stuff, right? They got killed in transition. They got killed on the offensive glass, et cetera. And last night also was not great on the offensive glass for Charlotte.
Better than you imagined, though, with how
Yeah.
well Charlotte has been as an offensive rebounding team. But yeah, still a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah. Tonight, though, better. 24%
Yeah.
offensive rebound rate for Dallas, which, I think the Bucks, I think they were, I want to say their defensive rebound rate was like 69%, something
Yeah,
like
it was
that.
like 70. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, bottom five-ish, I think, in the league. So that's the irony here, right? That was like the thing that they were actually doing pretty well early in the season when they were like not playing transition defense at all and just sort of struggling, giving up a layup line. That they did defensive rebound. So that's like the one thing that's weirdly sort of flipped since the Knicks game when Brooke went back to the drop and sort of everything's kind of stabilized again, is the defensive rebounding is still poor. And they still have been fouling a fair bit, but tonight a much better performance on both counts there. And, again, I don't know. It's like I really haven't had issues with Adrian Griffin's rotations really all year, other than, again, we've talked about like Beasley. Just not. I mean, Beasley should play, but I just don't feel like he makes that much sense as a starter with Dame. But it feels like the right guys have been playing, and now it's kind of like, well, I mean, who else are you going to play, right? Like, you don't have that many options when you lose the three guys that you weren't playing with tonight. Like, yeah, I mean, you probably do need to play, AJ Green. You're not getting into the Robin Lopez Thanasis kind of group, but we've seen even Thanasis, get some minutes during non-garbage time over the past week. So yeah, I mean, I think the important thing right now is just, vibes have been improved, and again, it seems like, again, that there's much better energy around the team. Winning cures a lot of things, but not everything. But I think especially if you're Adrian Griffin, you're new to this team. Clearly, you had a bunch of guys here that had won doing certain things, and he obviously was doing some things very differently. And now I think they've settled into a better rhythm, where it's like Brooke Lopez is dropping. Okay, you're putting Brooke Lopez in the obvious, you're using him in the obvious way you should be using him. And it seems like he's in a much better place. When Brooke's happy, a lot of other things start working better. But by the same token, it's like, we still see Bobby Portis blitz and switch and do other stuff, which I think is important, that Adrian Griffin is not, being dogmatic about that, because that was always the thing that I think we most sort of got on Bud's case about, was just being sort of too rigid systemically and things like that. And so I think seeing again, trying different stuff, like as long as you get the base stuff, like, you start doing reasonable stuff there, right? Then I think it becomes interesting. And then I think the being experimental is, especially early in the season, trying to figure out how you got these guys to work together. I think it's generally good to at least try things. And I thought it was interesting tonight. I mean, we've seen them rely on the zone a lot, but tonight it felt like they went into zone at one point, gave up like a wide open three right away. I think it was Tim Hardaway. It was like a one pass away three from Luka, where they were trying to get the ball out of Luka's hands. Tim Hardaway nails a three, and I don't know if they played any more zone after that. They might have, but it felt like they were like, okay, you know what? Actually, this isn't a zone night, and I think that was probably the right move.
Yeah, no, go figure. It's not a zone night against a pretty good shooting team, but yeah, like we've seen good rotations. We've seen enough of a balance too. Of here's what the guys are comfortable with. Here's how I can introduce some new things. And it's still early. That there's still time for this to continue improving. We've seen enough subtle signs of growth in terms of the wins in this team's record, the eye test, and the numbers too. Since the Knicks game, they're right around 10th in offense, defense, and net rating, which, offense is going to keep getting better. The defense, it just maybe what it is. I think they're 22nd for the year as a whole, but those numbers kind of strange too, in that they're closer to the middle of the pack by a lot than they are to where they were to start the season. So as long as you can be in the top half, our defense is good enough and our offense becomes elite, and that'll take us over the top. I think that's basically what you look for these final 69 games. But look, it's all well and good right now, and it's trending upward for this team. It was a good win tonight it was a good back-to-back to have to beat the Hornets the way you did with the point differential. It's going to be important. We didn't even talk about the in-season tournament. But look, all of a sudden the Bucks are in a spot where you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself, but with the point differential now, if the Heat lose to the Knicks, there's a good chance you could lock this up as long as you don't lose to the Washington Wizards. Because if it's a three-way tie, unless the Knicks win by 40 points, you're probably going to have the point differential, and especially with the Wizards as your next opponent. So we may see the Bucks go on a deep in-season tournament run as well. So it's been a good, yeah, I know, time to get excited. It's been a good couple of days, week really for the Bucks. But as you mentioned, that could go downhill quickly if we don't see the results that we hope for Wednesday night, the night before Thanksgiving, against the Boston Celtics. Before we wrap up, your reminder, Locked On has launched their first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for your 24/7 coverage. It's got the top stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. 4 straight wins for the Bucks. The numbers starting to look better. A great game from Giannis. A good game, all things considered, from Dame. But again, Frank, when we reconvene, you'll be back with Camille for the Wizards game. But I think all of us are planning on doing a post game for that Celtics game. Hopefully, it is not a typical Bucks visit to Boston, especially early in the season, because those tend to be where we see, man, what happened there?
Yeah, it's going to be the best test so far, and we'll see. I think the Celtics have had some like random kind of injuries here. Doesn't seem like anything serious with Kristaps Porzingis and Jaylen Brown. So I would assume those guys will be back by Wednesday. So fingers crossed that it'll just be, Jay Crowder for the Bucks that's out, and we'll see what's going on with the Celtics at that point. But yeah, and man, you're already thinking ahead of me on in-season tournament, man. I just take the in-season tournament one game at a time. But yeah, I guess is it really just Wizards and Heat they have left, right? So as long
Wizards
as
and Heat they have left. Yeah, and the Heat have their 2 toughest opponents left. So like theoretically, you should kind of what you did to the Hornets. You should blow out the Wizards. I know that's a big if, but you should win comfortably, which would then continue to pad your point differential.
And having a chance to clinch the in-season your in-season tournament group by winning it's in Miami, correct me if I'm wrong, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That would be pretty nice. Now, part of me is like, yeah, I mean, you really can't talk that much shit to the Heat because they just, cleaned your clock in the playoffs. And let's be honest, as much as it'd be cool to win the NBA in-season tournament, I don't know that'd be, that big of a deal. But hey, Miami's been, regular season house of horrors. It feels like over the last 10 or 15 years. Like, it just feels like it's always a bad place for the Bucks to play. Giannis has had a lot of regular season and for that matter, postseason struggles in Miami. So that would be really nice. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, right? Let's first see the Bucks just kick the crap out of the Wizards to start the week, and then hopefully you go into Boston with a 5-game winning streak. And again, if you lose that game, the most important thing is you've put yourself in a decent spot here. Nobody's like running away and hiding in the East yet at this point. For all the kind of ups and downs and kind of meh that we've seen from the Bucks. They're 9-4, half game behind Philly for the 2 seed. And I mean, hell, if you somehow, again, if you beat the Celtics on Wednesday, then all of a sudden you're going to be feeling pretty damn good about where you are here at this stage of the year. So again, the season is long.
Season is long, and it's an interesting week ahead for the Bucks. With that Celtics matchup, you got 2 against the Wizards, including the aforementioned in-season tournament. And then Damian Lillard gets to face his former team Thanksgiving weekend when the Blazers come to town. So a lot to get into this upcoming week, another 4-game week for the Bucks. But as I mentioned, Frank and Camille will be back Monday night after the Wizards game to recap what is hopefully a Bucks win, which would be 5 in a row. and to continue to get the good vibes going into Wednesday night in Boston. We'll wrap it up there. For Frank, I'm Justin. We'll talk to you once again Monday night with more Locked On